All right, everybody, welcome back to another episode of the Post Game Podcast. Appreciate you checking it out here. My guest today is a former U.S. Navy Top Gun fighter pilot and Chief Executive Officer of Top Gun Options, LLC. He's also a keynote speaker, best-selling author, and host of the MAX Afterburner Podcast. A few years ago, he founded his 501c3 No Fallen Heroes to help end veteran suicide through the use of psychedelic assisted therapy. His name is Matthew Whiz Buckley. So really cool catching up with Whiz, just hearing his mindset as a Navy fighter pilot and a little bit of his transition into civilian life afterwards. A few things we discuss are his transition out of the military, how it was tough for him going from the Navy and that tight-knit team to Wall Street, where it was just a different culture. How he's fighting veteran suicide right now through his 501c3 No Fallen Heroes, and how he rediscovered his faith. So he had some things go on early on in his life where he said he lost his faith and ultimately has come back to it and is now doing some great things with veterans. So Whiz, thanks for coming on, man. I think this was awesome, just learning from you and hearing something a little bit different from what we've been talking about on the podcast with athletes. So would love to talk some more military vets as well, and just how they've kind of navigated that transition to life afterwards. So quick aside, we opened the conversation with some Eagles talk. Whiz from South Jersey. This was recorded a few weeks ago when the Eagles were not good. Now they're good. So you can kind of disregard that part. But anyway, great conversation, Whiz. Thanks again, and hope you enjoy this conversation as well with Matthew Whiz Buckley. Awesome, man. We're live with Matthew Whiz Buckley. I'm honored to have you on, man. It's great. I've just been keeping up with a lot of your stuff and following you, and I'm just sharing a little bit about how I came across you in the first place. And you have a crazy story. You got a crazy story. So I'm just excited to dive into it and hear from your perspective. So.
Thanks for having me, Joe. I appreciate it, man. Fired up. Looking forward to our conversation.
Yeah, no doubt. So we were just talking a little bit offline. We have a connection between St. Augustine Prep and Malvern Prep. So I was a Malvern guy, and you obviously went to St. Augustine's from South Jersey. So what was that experience like, and just growing up, if you could share a little bit?
Dude, well, I'm clearly a little bit older than you, man. St. Augustine Prep was a hole in the wall. Back in the day, I think my graduating class had like 25 kids, and now it's like some sort of elite institution. It's which is great. I get random connections from guys who are like, "Hey, can you write a letter of rec?" I'm like, they even require a letter of recommendation now. Man, it was like a reformatory school when I went there. When I grew up in Margate, and then my folks moved out to Absecon. And all my friends went to Holy Spirit High School, which had boys and girls. And then, of course, my mom sent me to St. Augustine, which was boys only. So thanks, Mom and Dad. But it was a great school. I mean, it obviously an all boys Catholic school gets you focused on your studies. And I don't know how they are today, but at least back in the day, I found out that why the Augustinians in their robe also have a big belt on there. So when needed, I was also put back into shape, which kind of set me up for my military career, I think. But miss South Jersey, miss the prep. It was definitely it helped formed who I am today.
100%. Yeah. Miss being in Eagles territory, although not right now. But
no, I don't actually. My God, man, we used to say always a bridesmaid, never a bride, and then finally we won a Super Bowl. But man, it just doesn't seem to let up, man. The owner, I think it's on Lori, man. I thought they were going to get rid of the coach last year, or Hurts, or one or both, and then here we are again. So hopefully they start picking it up. I don't know if I'm a masochist. I just enjoy being angry and yelling at the TV, but hopefully they pick it up here. But it's not looking too good, man. I'm old enough to remember, Randall Cunningham, McNabb, hell, Michael Vick, and just screaming at the TV to run. When Jalen decides to run and it's timely, he's lethal, but he should watch some of those old clips of some of the previous Eagles quarterbacks that had legs, because he could be a lot more lethal than he is. But thank God we got Saquon, and hopefully AJ gets back soon, because they need to wake up.
They need something. Yeah, my dad loves to say, he's like, Philly fans, they're not happy unless they're unhappy, which I think
That's
is very
perfect.
very true. Yeah,
That's absolutely perfect, man.
Oh,
Yep.
that's funny. That's funny, man. So what kind of kid were you then? Because it takes a different type of kid to ultimately get on the path that you were. But what were you like before everything?
Man,
kind of started?
so the first half of my childhood was, I thought was pretty cool. Like I said, my original, my older brother and 3 sisters were born in South Philly, and then my mom and dad, just went down the expressway and moved down to the Jersey Shore in Margate, where my little sister and I were born. So, typical Irish Catholic family from South Jersey. I was an altar boy and all that good stuff, and but unfortunately, my childhood was marred by a pretty horrible tragedy. My brother and my 2 sisters were going to Villanova, and my sister Monica was a freshman. She had just started at Villanova, and the 3 of them were at an off-campus fraternity party. And my brother and my sister Marilyn said, "Hey, we're heading back to campus. Do you want to ride?" And my sister Monica said, "No, I'm going to go, with these guys." And 5 people in a Fiat, drunk driving, and the driver blew a stop sign. They got hit, and my sister Monica was thrown from the car and broke her neck, and she died. So I was, when you're I was just starting high school, I believe, or 8th grade or high school. So that was just brutal. I mean, it that's a hand grenade. She was the middle. She was the middle child, and that just, it literally was a hand grenade, and just destroyed my childhood. Technically I lost my parents. I played soccer, I played basketball at the prep, and, I'd miss the bus after school, and my dad would pick me up, and in between St. Augustine and where we lived was a cemetery in Mays Landing. And my dad stopped every day, and he got out of that car and he cried every day at her grave. So it was tough. So, kind of lost my faith around that time. We literally were the stereotypical Irish Catholic family, coat and tie, a little coat and tie to go to mass. Like I said, I was an altar boy, Catholic schools. So I just, I was done with my faith at that point. And unfortunately also had some sexual abuse as a child as well. So, first half of my childhood was pretty nice, and then the second half was just pretty brutal. High school is a tough time for a young man anyway, let alone having just lost your sister and kind of losing your parents. So yeah, it was sucked a little bit, but all these decades later, I can actually look back after, and we can get into how I healed. But I'm actually at a point in my life where I'm thankful for my suffering, because it helped make me who I am today.
Mhm. Man, I just preparing for this, I've heard you tell that story a bunch, and each time it's just kind of like just crazy, man. Like I fortunately haven't had anything to that. I don't know too many people that have, right? Like just that type of thing that just stops you in your tracks.
Oh yeah.
But then like, did the community was the community pretty tight at that point? Like you probably did. I just like that probably made you grow up pretty quick, right?
Well, yeah. I'll remember to this day, just obviously a ton of people. I will never get the sound of my dad screaming at the top of his lungs in the middle of the night. My brother called and told my parents, and I'll never forget the scream of my father. But the next day I'm sitting on the couch with my little sister, just kind of the 2 of us just huddled up as just scores of people and priests and people from Villanova. So the initial reaction is obviously like overwhelmed with people, but guess what, as time goes on, they all kind of go away, right? The dinners that people made and stuff like that. So, people actually need you more as time goes on, as opposed to right at the beginning, because most people, what can you say? What can you do? Nothing. You actually technically can't. Obviously, it's nice to have all of that, but yeah, it's, the initial reaction was great, but as time goes on, and this was obviously a while ago, so really not too many resources, man, back in the day to deal with this type of trauma and grief, and, really not too much infrastructure for kids, my little sister and I, and obviously it was tough for all my brother and my, because they were still at Villanova, my brother and my other sister. So yeah, it was pretty tough.
Mm-hmm. And that totally changed the trajectory of what your life has I guess what's happened over the last however many years, like since that's happened. So
yeah, well, and my dad, he like I said, he was never the same. I remember playing with my kids one time, my two boys, Matthew and Jack. They were little, and I remember sitting next to my dad, and we were watching them play, and he knew what I was talking about, obviously, because I looked at him and I said, "Dad, how did you do it?" And he looked at me and he said, "I had you." And he said, "Matthew, when they lowered her into the ground, I was going to jump in there with her. That's where I needed to be." So he died years later of a heart attack. He was dead before he hit the ground. It's like a widowmaker or something like that. He was getting on the treadmill, in my mom and dad's garage. After work, he used to, go for a run on the treadmill, and he was dead. He broke his nose. He didn't even put his hands out. So they said he was. Jeez. So I'm convinced he died of a broken heart. He was never the same. Yeah. But decades later, I actually healed, did a lot of healing of both of those experiences. But it did kind of shape the rest of my life, especially going to fly fighter jets in the military and dealing with a lot of losses in the military of brothers. So yeah, in the military as a fighter pilot, you're taught to compartmentalize, right? You need to put things in a little box. If you and I are flying into a target and Joe gets blown away, I can't stop mid-flight and start mourning you, right? I go, he's gone. I got to press into the target and get my bombs off and get back to the ship. Well, I put your loss into a little bit of a compartment. And then guess what happens? I don't get a chance to mourn you. There's another loss, or there's another mission, and then there's more, and then there's booze. And so all these little boxes of trauma that we store throughout our lives, or layers, people call them layers, just layers and layers, they end up building up. And especially, in the military and the fighter pilot community, all these little boxes can build up, man. And then one day they're all going to magically open like a Jack in the Box, and it can be pretty bad.
Yeah, man, it's unimaginable. And then especially like being, I think just where we're from, and especially growing up in that environment, like Irish Catholic, et cetera, like it's not really encouraged to ever talk about any of that stuff. Or yeah, I mean, from your
Correct.
background, I think my background, like playing sports and everything, you suppress that. And I don't mean to compare anything that you have experienced to me, but like you just don't talk about that. So that's why what you're doing, I think, is just so interesting and like contrary a little bit to the St. Augustine Prep and Malvern, which are both incredible places, but just a little bit different. So what about how'd you get on the path to being a fighter jet pilot? How did that start?
Yeah. So when I grew up in Absecon, across the street from me, one of my best friends growing up, his dad was a F-106 pilot in the New Jersey Air National Guard. So he flew fighter jets right outside of Atlantic City. And that guy was larger than life. He drove a Trans Am. He had a flight suit, and he was also an Eastern Airlines pilot. So this guy was just larger than life. And I'll never forget one day he told us, "Hey, when you guys get off the bus, make sure you stay at the bus stop this afternoon." We're like, "Yes, sir." We're like, it's literally up the block. It's right there. Why would we stay there? But it was on top of this little hill. So we got off the bus and we're standing there, like, is he picking us up? We were confused, but, looking out towards Atlantic City over the bay, I could see a little black dot with smoke and I'm trying to figure out what it is. And before I can figure out what it is, this F-106 is like literally right on top of us and pulls straight up into the vertical in full afterburner and blows us away, like our books flying around and dirt. And, I got rocks in my teeth, and I'm like looking straight up at this fighter jet, like doing aileron rolls straight up. And I was like, yeah, I think I want to do that. So it was pretty cool, and back then, again, I'm really aging myself, in the early 80s. We were in a Cold War, man. We were in a war with the Soviet Union, kind of it was cold, but there was bombers that would launch in and out of Cuba, and they would fly into our airspace and, kind of start their stopwatch and time how quick we would, scramble fighter jets to come up and intercept them. So it was kind of a, cat and mouse game. But, these guys, those F-106 pilots had like a real world mission. And I remember, because I drive from Absecon out to St. Augustine Prep, there would be mornings where I'd see them taxiing out, and I'd be late for school, man. And I'd get in a shitload of trouble because I sat there at the fence line. I was that guy. I was at the fence line as this kid, just watching these fighter jets and smelling the jet fuel. I'm like, you know what? I want to do that. But anybody can land on a 10,000 foot runway. Naval aviators land on aircraft carriers. So I used to watch, movies with my dad, like The Bridges at Toko Ri and The Battle of Midway. And I was like, man, not only do I want to be a fighter pilot, but I want to land on aircraft carriers. I was a student of history. I always loved history in high school and college. And, if you're a political science junkie like me, you know that whenever something goes wrong in the world, every U.S. president turns to their chairman of the Joint Chiefs or their national security advisor and says, where is the nearest aircraft carrier? Because we can put 4 acres of sovereign U.S. territory. We can put an air station off your country. I mean, 70% of this globe is covered by water. We can get you there. So I wanted to be on the tip of the spear, and flying fighter jets for the Navy seemed like a pretty cool Reese's peanut butter cup of the things I wanted to do.
Pretty unique career path, I'd say. Yeah, to get that started. So can you paint a picture of like what you're thinking as you're taking off in one of those, like just the mental preparation and like what that actually feels like? Because I have no clue.
Yeah, you go to a brief, right? You get in there with a brief with all the folks that are going to be in that mission, and it's almost like a church-like environment, man. It's almost like a seance. We call it chair flying. You'll chair fly that mission. You'll take, if you're going to drop bombs on a bad guy, you're looking at the satellite images and this and that. So you're actually going through. You fly the flight before you ever even get airborne. So that's the brief, right? Obviously, hopefully you got a good night's sleep, you ate right, so you brief, and then in between the brief and going to get dressed in your flight gear, you're in what's called your bubble, right? You probably see it with athletes too, man. On game day, they're out on the field, they got their headphones on or whatever. They are in their zone, they're in their bubble. So we call it in your bubble. So nobody's really supposed to be talking to you about any bullshit. Another reason I make fun of Air Force pilots is because they have a ground officer for everything, like the voting officer, the weather officer. On a Navy ship, space is limited. So being a fighter pilot was like number 5 on my list of things to do. I was like a maintenance officer. I was an admin officer. I had like a bunch of ground jobs and then pilot. So, if you're in your bubble, invariably your chief or a sailor would come up to you like, hey, Lieutenant Buckley, I'm like, no. I actually, would look forward to flying combat sorties over Iraq to get away from my ground jobs. It was a relief to get flying and get into my natural environment. So yeah, so you brief, you're in your bubble, you go put your equipment on, you go look at the book. Maintenance gives you a big book of all the maintenance that's been done on the jet you're assigned, and you sign it, man. You literally take your pen and you sign your name, your rank, and your date, and you own that aircraft, man. You are the pilot in command of that jet for the next, for that mission. And then up on the flight deck, man, it's the most dangerous work environment on the planet. And most people would be shocked to know that the young women and men on that flight deck, average age is 18, 19 years old. just making the magic happen. So I would try and walk as quickly on that flight deck to get to my jet and get in it and put the canopy down to be in my cocoon, because that flight deck is a pretty dangerous place. And then, yeah, man, taxi on up to the catapult. You're kind of on autopilot. Things are moving, your hands moving, you're going through your checklist, you're doing a bunch of stuff. And then when you're on that catapult and you run it up to full power, you wipe out the flight controls one last time to make sure everything's looking good. And then you salute the catapult officer and they touch the deck and somebody pushes that button and you go from 0 to 150 miles an hour in about a second and a half, maybe 2 seconds. It's pretty violent. It is a violent, sometimes you feel like you're hanging out the back of the jet as this thing gets going. You're like, you got thrown out the back. During the day, it's fun. A night catapult shot is just absolutely terrifying. It's pitch black. It's as dark as the inside of a basketball. Even if there's a moon out, it's just pitch black. I mean, the only sensation you'd have of anything going wrong during a catapult shot at night is your body impacting the water. So it's a pretty intense experience. And obviously, as soon as you get airborne, now you're focused on the mission. And as an F-18 pilot, we don't carry a lot of gas. So usually one of the first things we'd have to do before going into a bad guy country is in-flight refuel. So there's a probe that comes out of the jet, and then there's a basket that comes from the tanker, from the jet that's got the fuel. And it's like trying to stick a banana in a bobcat's ass, man. It's tough. So, we haven't even gotten on the mission yet. So the mission itself might be pretty tough, but the hardest thing to do on any mission I've ever been on is landing back aboard the boat. You have got to land on a ship that's moving day, night, bad weather, or the deck's pitching up and down, and you're probably low on gas. So it's a very, very intense environment where you have to be in the zone and 1,000% focused. If you're not, you're either going to kill yourself or you're going to kill a lot of other people. So there was absolutely little to no room for error.
Well, that's insane. What's it feel like when you're in the zone then?
It's a flow state. Everything is just moving and things are going, you're one with the machine, so to speak. There have been times where I've landed back aboard the ship and I don't even kind of remember the landing, just because my hands are on autopilot. I'm on my instruments. You're just in it. And then you'll land, you'll taxi and shut down. And you're like, man, that all just happened, And then it's kind of a big adrenaline letdown, right? So you've been on it for hours. I mean, I think my longest flight over Iraq was like 6, maybe 8 hours, and I had to refuel like 3 or 4 times. So you're constantly heightened, and then boom, you got to land aboard the boat. I know they did a study back in Vietnam of naval aviators. They had them wired up, EKG or whatever it was, dog fighting an enemy MiG, a North Vietnamese MiG, getting shot at by a surface-to-air missile or AAA, anti-aircraft artillery. None of those things raised the aviator's heart rate up like landing aboard the ship. So everything else was secondary. Landing aboard the boat is primary.
Man, have you ever talked to, I know you've talked to athletes about this because I was listening to you on Henrik Lundqvist's podcast, which is pretty cool.
Yeah.
Have you talked to them about like the comparison between what you were doing and them, like locking in and just the preparation? Yeah. What are some of the similarities? I'm
and I'll introduce them to you. You got to have them on your podcast. One of my best friends right now is Daniel Carcillo, Car Bomb,
Flyers,
2-time Stanley Cup champ from Chicago. He lost when he was on the Flyers. But Dan Carcillo is on the board of our foundation. He's just a great human being who healed a lot of his trauma because he was a goon, man, right? He was Car Bomb is his call sign.
It's him and Donald Brashear. Yeah. So
yeah. He was back on the Flyers when, still had the Broad Street Bullies thing. So Daniel and I talk all the time about the absolute similarities between athletes and fighter pilots. It's just, in their arena, they want to win just like I do. Losing sucks. The only difference is in my environment, losing technically can get you killed. You lose a hockey game or a football game, you can go kick dirt and you get to go home that night and have dinner. But you lose in my environment, you're not coming home and the wife's getting a flag,
Right. Yeah, man. Well, listen, I hate to skip over like the rest of your military career because it's just insane what you were doing. But so now the comparison, or maybe the lack of comparison, when you were transferring out of the military and then getting onto Wall Street. Because I've also heard you talk about that, where you're like, yeah, it's just a different environment. It's not the same same team, right? So maybe if you could just share a little bit about that.
Yeah, I had a very brief airline career. The morning of September 11th was my first and last day at work at American Airlines. I ended up racing out to Naval Air Station Fort Worth, where I was flying F-18s for the reserve, the Navy Reserve. So lost my airline job, got furloughed, and I was like, holy crap. I got to pay my mortgage, man. I just lost my airline career. And I had taught myself how to trade when I was on active duty. You don't join the military to get rich. You join the military to fly fighters, see the world, do all that stuff. So I was always interested in finance. So I taught myself how to trade. And then after I lost my, job on 9/11, I said, man, maybe I'll trade full time, because I was kind of good. And here's why. Trading's a form of combat when you think about it. Somebody's going to win and somebody's going to lose. So why wouldn't I use everything that I learned as a fighter pilot to my trading? Having a strategy, implementing tactics, contingency planning, right? Knowing, let's think about what could go wrong during this flight or trade before we even get airborne. So we don't have to freak out when it happens. We already know what we're going to do. And managing risk. I mean, options traders and fighter pilots are the most risk-averse people you're ever going to meet. First of all, we love ourselves too much to let anything bad happen to us, but we want to win. So I eventually, after I lost my job, I popped up on the radar of one of the largest volatility arbitrage firms in the country, headquartered in the Chicago Board of Trade. So I went from being in a fighter squadron to a multi-billion-dollar Wall Street firm. And man, you could not find a more 180 out environment. I mean, in a fighter squadron, if you don't trust a lady or a guy in that squadron with your life, they're gone. They're just not part of the team. You can't have that. When you're on a mission airborne with those folks, you trust them with your life. I got to Wall Street and guys are wearing golf cleats to go to work so they can step on you as they climb up. There were people that would push their own mother in front of a bus for $1. I couldn't trust these guys to watch my wallet if I went to the bathroom. So it was a very tough transition from high-performing team full of trust and discipline to I'll stab you in the back, to make 10 cents type of environment. So it sucked. I lost my mission. I lost a sense of purpose. And I remember my dad. He died of a heart attack when I was making a decision whether or not to do this. And I'll never forget what my father told me. I said, Dad, look at these zeros, man. Should I go do this? Because the other choice was to keep doing what I was doing, fly fighters part-time, and I was doing some public speaking, and it's kind of fun doing that stuff. And my dad's like, you seem really good at that stuff, son. I said, yeah, Dad, did you not hear what they offered me? And he said, son, it's not about the money. It's never about the money. And that's, man, he was right. He was right. Your father's usually always right about stuff. And he was right. So it just, because that wasn't me, being all about the money. I needed a mission. I needed a sense of purpose, and I needed to be around people I could trust. And that just that was not my experience on Wall Street.
Sure. Well, I'm sure you're not alone with other, people that you served with or worked with along the way. Like, how can that be improved? I mean, I know that's part of what you're doing now. We'll get into that a little bit, but like, what's the solution there?
Well, yeah, the military does a fantastic clearly a fantastic job of training us to do some pretty awful things to another human being. But when they're done with us, they do a pretty shitty job of transitioning us back to being a human. Mm-hmm. So they, over the years, continue to pay lip service to that. Well, we have a transition program. It's this lecture or that lecture. It's all crap. When they're done with you, they kind of spit you out. And the worst part about it is if you're injured, right? So one day I had a top secret clearance, SCI, special compartmented information, higher than top secret, right? So one day you can go from your government thinking that of you, Whiz, this is your F-18, top secret, boom, to the next day, the VA going, I don't believe there's anything wrong with you, and we're denying all your claims. Next. It's amazing how you go from that level of trust to you're an absolute liar. So the VA system is also broken. 15 years of flying fighter jets, I have horrific tinnitus. I have a squeal in my ears for the rest of my life. I can never lie in bed. I can't meditate without this. It's all of us aviators call it the sound of freedom. It's a horror. I think one of my buddies, F-18 buddy, put a bullet in his head because he just couldn't stand the tinnitus. But when I went to the VA, that ringing in your ears is not service related. I'm like, oh my God, man. So we don't have enough time for me to map out everything that they do wrong and everything that they can fix. It's a broken system. We've broken so many promises to our veterans. We promised to take care of them in health and this and that, and it's awful. VA employees, get bonuses based on how many claims they deny, and it's obscene what's going on and how veterans are treated in this country. Conservative estimates, use whatever number, anywhere between 30 and 40,000 homeless veterans on the streets of this country. And we are flooding this country full of it. There are immigrants who get $1,500 in New York City for vouchers for hotels and stuff like that a month. We have homeless veterans in this country sleeping on the streets. We treat people who break the laws better than we treat our veterans. It's devastating to me how we treat our heroes. And something needs to change.
Is that why you're so outspoken about this?
Yeah.
Kind of stuff. Yeah.
And anywhere from 17, why am I going to give you a range? Anywhere from 17 to 44 veterans check out every day on their own. Why is there a range 17 to 44? You ready for this? The most recent government numbers on veteran suicide are from 2021. They're 3 years old. Uncle Sam said 17.5 veterans take their own lives every day. Year and a half ago, a couple of small community colleges, right? Duke and the University of Alabama did their own studies. They dug into Uncle Sam's numbers and they said the number is closer to 44. 44 veterans. Uncle Sam was only counting violent suicides. Oh, a guy went into the parking lot, put a bullet in his head. What a shame. There's one. Those two fine institutions found out they went and talked to people. Oh no, she drank herself to death, or he overdosed. So 17 on the low end, which is a horror, almost up to 44 veterans a day take their own lives. That's why taking care of these people is absolutely critical. Man, Joe, this is a mass shooting. I can't even stand talking like this, but let me phrase it like this. Could you imagine if 17 to 44 kids were being shot, not like once a year in a horror, every day in a school in this country, Saturdays and Sundays too? We would flip the fuck out. This country even the gun nuts would be like, oh my God, we got to do something. Since it's veterans, it's kind of shrug. And when I tell people the real numbers, the color usually runs out of their face and they're like, I didn't know. Of course you didn't know. Do you think a year and a half ago, 2 years, when they came out with this study, Duke and Alabama, that the government held a press conference and said, breaking news, our numbers are completely wrong. It's double what we say. So we just kind of hide it, man. The government doesn't do what they should be able to do about it. And that's why I said, I'm going to do something about it.
Yeah, man. And that's what you're doing with No Fallen Heroes. It's great that you're speaking out. And I, from experience, obviously I can't speak to it, but I know guys that served and they've talked about it openly and how that's an issue. So how about then the transition then a little bit to the story with how you like healed from the trauma? I think that's pretty nuts too. Can you share that a little bit?
Yeah. God is great. And about 4 years ago, when I lost a groomsman in my wedding, Captain Eric Swenson, Swede, Marine Hornet guy, beautiful bride, 5 kids, gone. I'm like, oh my God, man. That was my third F-18 brother who checked out on his own. And I looked at my wife and I said, we got to do something. Let's start a foundation. I had done pretty well on Wall Street. My dad's voice hanging with me, Matthew, you can't take it with you. It ain't about the money. I'm like, let's throw this over the fence. So we started a foundation. But I sat here with my whiteboard going, how do you keep a veteran from killing themselves? Do you buy suits, help them write a resume? I was clueless. And then a close buddy of mine said, hey, there's a bunch of Navy SEALs and Special Forces guys, veterans that go down to Mexico, just south of San Diego, to some clinic, and they do psychedelic assisted therapy to heal their trauma. And there's a really cool group going, in a couple weeks. Would you want to go? And I looked at my buddy and I said, man, go to Mexico and do drugs with Navy SEALs? That sounds like a great weekend, man. Sign me up. I had absolutely no idea what I was in for. If any of the folks listening or watching have seen the movie Lone Survivor, with Mark Wahlberg, or read the book, obviously read the book called Lone Survivor. I went down to Mexico with Marcus Luttrell. And then if you're a coffee drinker and if you've ever heard of Black Rifle Coffee, I went down with JT, Jared Taylor, one of the founders of Black Rifle Coffee. I also went with another team guy who was a team guy with Marcus, and then an NFL player, a veteran. His name's Robert Gallery. He was an All-American at Iowa for 4 years, just got inducted into the College Football Hall of Fame, and then he played for the Raiders. And he was in a really bad place. 5 of us met each other in San Diego. Never met any of these guys. We had never met each other. 4 days later, when we came back to San Diego, we were completely healed, and we were the best friends. I talked to these guys several times a week. So if you do what I'm about to tell you in San Diego, you're a criminal. It's a felony. If you drive a half an hour south of San Diego, it'll save your life. Think about that for a second here. So the 5 of us went down to a place called the Mission Within, and we sat with a medicine, not a drug. Plants that God put on this planet for us to heal are not drugs. This ain't some dude in a lab coat with a beaker. This is the ultimate dude with a lab coat and no beaker. So we sat with a medicine called ibogaine. Now, iboga, I-B-O-G-A, iboga is the most powerful psychedelic on the planet. It's root bark from Gabon, Africa, Central West Africa. Some people think it's the tree of knowledge. It's got like 12 alkaloids in it. One of the alkaloids is called ibogaine. So they pull out that alkaloid called ibogaine, which is incredibly powerful for addiction and also PTSD and traumatic brain injuries. Man, this was a 12 to 14 hour, without a doubt, the most significant and spiritual experience of my life. Now, marrying my wife and have my 3 kids, all up there. This is tied for first because it put all of that into perspective. And it's not, it's a waking dream. It's not some, you're tripping or you're wide awake, man. You put your eye shades on, It's a movie. Eye shades up. There's the nurses. There's Marcus. All right. Eye shades back down. So it's not what you would think it is. It's a waking dream. And man, I regained my faith because I was with God. God, it's just, I had to learn a new SAT word when I got home. Ineffable. Ineffable means you can't put into words something that you experience. So it's just so hard for me to talk about it, but let me share a couple big points. I was on my knees in front of this most incredible white light that it was love and energy. It was a peace I had never felt before, being in the presence of this. And I said, God, I'm like, I am a horrible father, husband. I'm a drunk. I'm a druggie. I'm broken. And God just kind of just in an instant, all of that was gone. It was gone. And he said, Matthew, I do not make imperfect things. Let me just take these things that aren't really yours. They're good. I got these. Let me show you what you can do. And man, I was healed. At one point, my sister Monica came, and she was perfect. She was angelic, even more beautiful than I remembered. And then right next to her, my father appeared. And I can't remember the last time I'd seen my father smile after Monica died. And he was just so happy. Both of them were just so happy to see me. And I had some time with them, and I was healed, but then they started to leave. And it was a horror. I'm like, don't leave. And they came back, and they smiled even more, and they just kind of nodded, and I followed them this time. And as they went to leave, they just kind of went into everything. They went into my daughter, Keely. They went into me. They went into the trees, the ocean, the breeze. And I learned that they never left. They're sitting right here on this podcast. They never left me. And I was healed. Decades of healing. It's just incredible. A lot of other things that I experienced, but man, it was without a doubt, it saved my life. It changed my life. I was a drinker. I don't know if you can be a good drinker. I was a bad drinker. I couldn't even look at alcohol 8 months after this treatment. It made me retch. It made me dry heave if I smelled it or I looked at it. It's an addiction interrupter. And now I can have a glass of wine with my steak if I want to, or my pasta. Old me, a glass of wine meant a bottle, probably 2, maybe even 3. Now it destroyed alcohol in my life. And I didn't have significant, brain issues, but these guys, they showed me Marcus, his brain scan from the VA was dark and black and gray. 3 months after the ibogaine, it was white. And I bring that up because although I didn't do any scans or everything, when we drove back to San Diego and everything was clean, everything was clear, everything had a shine to it. This fog that I've been carrying for decades was gone. It's just like God just wiped our eyes and said, look at things differently. So destroyed my alcoholism. Robert Gallery, the football guy, I bumped into him a year later at a fundraiser. I'm like, oh my God, this huge dude just hit me. What, am you going to kick my ass? I didn't recognize him. He was a different human being, full of light and energy, man. He was in the medicine for like a day and a half. That medicine went in and did a ton of work on Robert, but he is now doing his foundation is doing ibogaine and iboga for football players with CTE. and all these head injuries. So all of us got back. I call it the world's greatest Ponzi scheme, because you come back healed, and you want to tell everybody. You want to help your brothers and sisters who are hurting. I got home, like I said, I'm not one to throw this sentence around too much, trust me, but I was born again. I was absolutely given a new lease on life. And I bring that up because of my loved ones, right? Because my wife, Susie, who's been through all of this, she is skidded through my lows, man. And she is a gift from God. But, I get home and I'm like, let's go, Susie, get up. Everything's great. Life's great. And she's like, yay for you. I mean, so after a couple months, Susie went down to the Mission Within, and she went down with some Navy SEAL wives, and I think she went down with a Gold Star wife too, whose husband, and these 5 women, wow, they did the exact same thing. Susie came home. We've never been better parents. We've never been a better couple. I mean, everybody's got their crappy days, but when I have bad days now, I'm not in the bad day. I look at it. I'm like, man, you're having a shitty day, dude. But that's me saying that. Old me in a shitty day, I'm in it. And I'm in it. And it's bad. So completely different way that I look at struggles now in my life. So coming back from that retreat, I said, this is how we're going to end veteran suicide, or at least eliminate it. So we renamed our foundation. It's called the No Fallen Heroes Foundation. So we give healing grants to veterans, first responders, and their families to go heal with these medicines. And, quick tangent here. These aren't for everybody. Absolutely not for everybody. I'm not a doctor. I don't play one on TV. I'm not a psychologist, a psychiatrist. I'm just sharing, what happened with me. But radical trauma might need radical healing. I mean, there are so many different healing modalities, yoga, breath work, meditation, walking on the beach, climbing a mountain in Nepal. There are so many different ways to heal. But a lot of folks that I see with radical trauma, this can be considered some radical healing. And don't trauma shame. Don't trauma grade yourself. I remember going, hey, man, I was up in the air conditioning at 30,000 feet. These guys are on the ground seeing their buddies' heads get blown off. Trauma is trauma. If something's hurting you, you deserve to heal. You don't trauma shame yourself or grade yourself. And I bring that up because we're starting to help some females and, unfortunately, males who are victims of MST. Military sexual trauma. There are some folks who've never even been close to the front lines, never been shot at. But, you expect your enemy to shoot at you and try and kill you and hurt you. You don't expect your squadron mate to hurt you. So we've actually helped some ladies who have experienced MST who weren't even near combat. But trauma is trauma, and we don't trauma shame or trauma grade. So that's why I started this foundation, to help those 3 groups, because there was a group out there that was just helping Navy SEALs do the medicine. Then there's another foundation who I love, who just helps combat veterans. But my quote combat is embarrassing. I was not in combat. Me flying over Iraq was without a doubt the most boring flying of my naval career. Going to Top Gun was tough for me. Over Iraq was boring. So I was like, I'm not a combat guy, but I have trauma. So at the No Fallen Heroes Foundation, we went big tent. We help veterans, first responders, and their family members, because a lot of guys and gals get out. They take off that uniform. They don't take off the trauma. And then they go home and they become a state trooper, a cop, a sheriff, a first responder, firefighter. And then guess what? That uniform brings them more trauma. I have a buddy who was a 20-year Marine who went to Miami-Dade, I think, fire rescue. He's like, my 20 years in a Marine trauma is a joke compared to what I saw as a first responder. So that's why we help first responders too, because they serve as well. So that's my mission, man. I got home and I said, God, thank you for this. And I I found my faith. I remember when I experienced God as that white light of energy and love. And I remember looking at that thing going, where you been? And I remember God saying to me, where have you been? He said, I've been here, welcome back. So I rediscovered my faith. I've never been more spiritual in my life. I am not religious. I've never been more spiritual in my life. So there you go.
Wow. I appreciate you sharing the story, man. Yeah, and I've heard you tell that story too about, your dad and your sister, and I've heard you get choked up telling it, but also heard you not
every time. Every time. I feel them.
Yeah.
Because as I said, crappy days, whatever. I still get my stuff going on, but when I go back to that moment, it knocks all the rust off. I've never, I think I used to make fun of people who journal. That's weird. You journal with this medicine work, you journal. So I'll go back, on some days, and I'll sit over in my office couch and go read my chicken scratch writing from those couple days on that retreat. And I'm back in it, man. It helps me heal. I'll be integrating this for the rest of my life. I still fly. We have a fighter jet with our foundation. We take donors flying in. So you don't want to hear a pilot say this. I have no fear of death. Now, I want to get old and be a cranky grandfather and yell at my grandkids to get off the lawn. But what I'm telling you is I absolutely have zero fear of death. I am so at peace and know, when I take that final breath, it's going to be the best day of my existence, because I got to experience it just briefly. And that's literally what God told me. He's like, hey, do you understand now? This is your default state, right? The happiness, joy. He said, and I was left, because I remember at one point in my journey, like kind of hanging out next to God, I guess, and looking at this planet. And not that God can weep, but he's like, look at what y'all are doing, man. War, poverty, hate, crime. I mean, racism. You guys are all the same piece of cosmic stardust. You're all the same. And look at what you're doing to this. I tell people, one of the reasons I believed my core, these medicines are still, thank you, Oregon, and thank you, Colorado. These are legal at a state level. Clearly, the federal government, one of the main reasons these things are illegal is because they have the power to turn warriors into peacemakers. I've seen the most meat-eating, knuckle-dragging Navy SEALs who could kill you with their look turn into the exact opposite. Because the medicine knocks this off, and it just shows you we're all souls, man. We are all, according to God, perfect souls. It's the shells that we throw on top of each other that cause this hate and war and crime. This is hell. I remember looking at Earth, standing next to God. I'm like, this is hell. This is purgatory. This sucks. What I got to experience is supposed to be our default state, but again, God gave us free will. He didn't make us robots to just worship him all day, 24/7. What good does that do? So in addition to having love, giving us the capability to love, there's a duality in the universe, man. Dark, light, good, bad, and evil. And so we're seeing that in the world. And I'm telling you, man, the rise of these medicines, here's the United States and the world. We're going freaking straight into the side of a mountain, man, accelerating. The jet's on fire and we're flying into a mountain. But the rise of people wanting to heal using these medicines, maybe it's going to lift us out of this. I mean, I ain't got no problem with hippies. I love my hippie brothers and sisters. But, the first kind of psychedelic shot we had in the 60s and 70s, Richard Nixon, what did you take to not want to go kill the yellow man on the other side of the planet? Well, I took these mushrooms and I love everybody. Okay, well, now those are a felony and here's your rifle. Go kill people. So, the first time around, excuse me, it was hippies and anti-war and the government said, oh, well, we can't have that. This time around, leading maybe this next psychedelic revolution, Navy SEALs, fighter pilots, first responders, police. You wouldn't believe, Joe, how many active duty cops, firemen, state troopers I have applying for grants that want to do these medicines under the radar. Could you imagine, we always hear some people in this country say, we need to reimagine policing. I'll help you reimagine policing. How about let them go take a week off to go scrub? Could you imagine a police officer showing up to a call full of more empathy and compassion instead of showing up to the call all, freaked out or, and they're doing a lot of drinking and self-medicating too. So I'm telling you, man, there's one last thing I'll share with you. Another reason these medicines are illegal, because I go up to I can't stand it. I go to DC, man. It's gross. The whole thing is gross. But he shall remain nameless. But I was talking to a congressman behind closed doors. Oh, Whiz, I love what you're doing. Okay, thank you, Congressman. But you're going to have a problem with the, big pharma and tobacco and alcohol folks. I'm like, isn't that your job? I'm going to have a problem? Isn't that your job? Mm-hmm. So this is not going to come from them down. This is a we the people moment. This is a Benjamin get your musket. This has got to come from us up. Because unfortunately, we the people, Whiz, ain't signing really huge checks to donate to these people, to their campaigns. Pharma, alcohol, tobacco, they pay the bills in DC, folks, not us. And clearly, if you're Pfizer, Moderna, Johnson & Johnson, Eli Lilly, there's no money in healing. These medicines can be one and done. There's a bunch of folks that we've helped that they did it once and years later, they're like, no, that was an ass kicking and I'm good. I go back maybe, every other year or, to knock the rust off. I got ice on my wings as an aviator and I'll go de-ice, but a lot of people are one and done. So there's no money in healing. So for all the folks that are like, why is this stuff illegal? Just whenever anybody asks me anything like that, the easiest answer is follow the money. There's no money in healing. So hopefully this time around, Marcus, JT, Whiz, an NFL player, hopefully regular mom and pop on the street can look at us and go, man, these ain't hippies wearing drug rugs. These are some of our nation's most elite people, and they're advocating for this. So maybe we should too.
It's crazy, man. It's nuts. I wonder what even like leaders of the country would benefit, or what they think about, or how they could maybe even benefit from it.
I know for a fact Joe Biden's missed a huge opportunity because Hunter, the reason Hunter looks not like he used to and isn't a raging crack addict right now, he went to Mexico and did an ibogaine treatment. Joe Biden missed an awesome opportunity to go, hey, my son was maybe a piece of shit, but he went down to Mexico, did these medicines, and look at him. He's sorry for what he did. But I also heard that our nation's veterans are having to go down there and do this. You know what? With the stroke of a pen, I'm going to do something. He totally missed a huge opportunity to do this. So I know that the current president of the United States has family experience with these medicines. I don't know if the stigma of, it was psychedelics. God bless Hunter Biden now, man. He looks like he's a changed human being. He still has to atone for what he did in the past, but hey, man, good on you. But I know for a fact he went to Mexico and did the medicine. I just don't know why the administration doesn't. Well, that also, I'm telling you, it's the power of big pharma and all these folks. There ain't no money in healing. 2 months ago, the FDA denied MDMA being used for therapeutic use. Doesn't matter that scores of veterans went and testified or went to Capitol Hill. Doesn't matter. The FDA declined it. And we had, I remember, I think it was about a year ago, I saw a headline that said AOC and Dan Crenshaw. And I'm like, I didn't want to read the rest of the headline. I'm like, what, did they kill each other? AOC and Dan Crenshaw agree on psychedelic assisted therapy for veterans. So this is one of the only issues in this country today in Washington where both sides are agreeing. Even the law and order Republicans who are like, these are drugs. After I talk to them for 3 minutes, they're like, oh, they're not drugs. Why aren't we doing this? It's because of these unelected bureaucrat blobs in DC, the FDA, the VA. There's a revolving door between these and Big Pharma, revolving door between the VA. It's gross. And like I said, these congressmen and senators can get up there and say good speeches, right? Like, oh, we fully support our veterans dealing with this stuff. They ain't cashing our checks because they're a little smaller, right? Don't forget that, folks. Politicians can say one thing in public and we fully support your mission and then not vote for it, right?
Yeah, right.
So
yeah, that's a
welcome
problem.
to my world.
I'm sure, but all right, Whiz. Well, so what's next for you? I know you got the MAX Afterburner podcast. You're maybe doing some keynote speaking. So a little bit of that.
Yeah, man. One of my passions. Go to whizbuckley.com, WHIZ, whizbuckley.com. I love doing keynotes and helping businesses improve their execution. But what next for me? Thank you to Oregon and Colorado, because for the past couple of years we've been forced to escape to Mexico and Costa Rica to do these medicines, and it would make me furious, man. Getting on an airliner in the U.S. to leave this country to go heal veterans who incurred trauma serving this one. It made me furious. So thank you, Oregon. Thank you, Colorado, for leading the way, because now we're starting to do healing retreats in those two states. And then hopefully we're working with a company that's a streaming service company that's just launching called Live, L-I-V Entertainment. They want to do a docu-series called No Fallen Heroes Extraction. They want to film.
Saw that. Yeah.
They want to film, a vet, a first responder, and a family member. I think we actually have a Gold Star wife who's going to do it. So we're gonna go, document the healing journey of those three incredible human beings, because I think that's going to help too. If we get a docu series out there that shows this, I mean, I can tell you my story anecdotally, but kind of seeing it visually, seeing somebody lying on their back with their eye shades on, or purging or something like that. I think that's going to really help the cause. So yeah, so we have our documentary coming out, and then hopefully just keeping the healing mission going. I tell people, what's ultimately up for Whiz. I don't want to be doing this. Nothing would make me happier 3-5 years from now that the No Fallen Heroes Foundation doesn't exist, that these medicines are legal, and that the VA is actually doing their job and getting these to the veterans in need. We should not have nonprofits doing this. It's a failure of our government. So what's next for Whiz? I'd love to not be doing this ever again and go retire and go surf in Hawaii or something like that. But until those days happen,
yep.
If this is work, you can sign me up for the rest of my life to do it. But hopefully I get put out of work very soon.
All right, man. Well, listen, there's one thing that's clear. You're passionate as hell about this stuff. So good for you, man. Cause it's your own experience. And I don't know, while you were saying that, I'm just thinking, like, I wonder what people like traditionalists say. I'm sure you get some pushback on it, but it's probably no denying it for you that like it's helped you personally. So
let me share this real quick. This one's good.
Yeah.
So Marcus Luttrell's wife, Melanie. So Marcus and Melanie, they make the Pope look Jewish. You don't get any more Catholic than these two. I'm not kidding you. They go to mass, I think, almost every day. They take flowers from the ranch outside of Houston to the church and you do the altar. I mean, I think Marcus is a deacon. Yeah, I think he's a deacon now in the church. But anyway, so when Marcus was like, hey, Melanie, I'm going down to Mexico to do this stuff, she's like, you're opening the door to Satan. These are demons. This is witchcraft. And the church frowns upon it. I mean, and she'll tell you. He came home, different human being, healed. She's like, oh my God. So I think it was however many months later, Melanie's like, you know what? I think I should maybe go sit with the medicine. She got back from sitting with the medicine, and I talked to her, and she said, Whiz, I lost my faith. And I'm like, oh my God. She said, I don't need it anymore. I experienced it. And I was like, oh my God, you got me. She's like, everything that I believed, I experienced. I don't need my faith anymore. I actually have my experience. I was blown away. They've never been more, that made I teared up when she told me that, man. It blew me away. She's like, yep. It was the most incredible thing she'd ever experienced. And she doesn't have faith now. She has experience. So, let me leave you with this. If you listen to this or watch this, and it's moving around a little bit, 5 years ago, Whiz, if I heard me talking like this, I'd kick my own ass. The medicine calls to you. If you're sitting here and there's the hair on the back of your neck going up a little bit, it's probably calling to you. Do a little research. If it's not, it's not. But trust me. And it's funny, after I help people heal, they're like, you know what, dude? You are absolutely right. The medicine called to me. If it ain't, it ain't. If it is, maybe it is. Maybe you should listen.
Maybe you should listen. There you go, man. I think that's a good place to leave off. So thanks for coming on, Whiz. This was different experience for me, just hearing about this and just taking it for what it is, like not judging it, but like that's your experience, man. And it's helped you. Yep. So I appreciate it. Yeah.
Thanks, Joe. Thanks for having me, man. And I appreciate everything you're doing too. And go Birds.
Go Birds. Yes, sir. All right, man.
Thanks, bro.
It. Yep. No problem.
You bet.